I'm Genevieve Randall with Nebraska Public Media, music director here. So pleased to support Lincoln Symphony Orchestra with these pre-concert chats. A note too that some LSO concerts can be heard statewide on our occasional series, Nebraska Concerts, which airs following Friday live at 11 a.m. Central on that network, hosted by Laura Black, longtime announcer. For this pre-concert chat, I am joined here by Ed Polachek, of course, our maestro, and as I refer to him, my beloved Ed. Thank you for being here, Ed, for this chat.
Thank you, my Genevieve.
And yes, he knows one of my nicknames. And we have got special guests here because this concert, called Experience the Intrigue, features a piece by composer Julia Adolphe. She is here. Her work has been featured by ensembles like the Los Angeles Philharmonic, all the way to the New York Philharmonic, in venues from National Sawdust to Disney Hall and in between. And Rita Porphyris is playing this viola concerto that was written by Julia Adolphe. And she has taught at the Hart School in Connecticut, about four other schools that I could find, and performed around the globe. Currently, co-principal viola of the Iceland Symphony. Welcome to the two of you here to the chat as well.
Thank
Thank
you. So
you.
happy to be here.
So experience the intrigue just for those who are watching this ahead of the concert, like days in advance. This is Friday, February 13th, 7:30 p.m. at the Leeds Center for Performing Arts. We've got the Jean Sibelius Finlandia, Rita playing Julia's piece, which is titled Unearth Release, and then the Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade, an amazingly romantic piece. So since we have our special guests here, Julia, I'm going to dive right in with you. And I just want to get this out of the way for any of our listeners who are longtime public radio fans and who recognize the name Adolphe, that yes, indeed, if you have listened to the Piano Puzzler on Performance Today, your uncle is indeed Bruce Adolphe.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, now
That's
we've
great.
got that established there. So the viola concerto. Um, I know that viewers and listeners here to our pre-concert chat will have some program notes, but I just want to touch on a few things. First of all, the origin of the title.
Sure. Well, titles I usually come up with last, actually, in my creative process. But you can hear over the course of the work's three movements that the viola and the orchestra kind of move from the bottom of the register of and range up to the top. So there's kind of this movement, the first movement is darker and it's in the viola has a really luscious, rich tone at the bottom of the register. And then in the second movement, there's more of this, it's just called surface tension. There's kind of this back and forth in the mid range of the orchestra and viola, and then it sort of ascends as the piece progresses. And I think it's for me as a composer and for many artists, I think that is the feeling that we get when we write, that we're unearthing something and we're kind of releasing it out into the world.
So what was the start of this piece then? You said the title comes later. You explained perfectly where that title came from. What was the spark for the music then?
Well, whenever I write, I come up with an emotional narrative or a story that I want to tell about my personal life. And for me, that's just so that I can make the music as specific as possible. So let's say, I'm trying to capture, you know, a disturbed feeling or anger about something going on in my life. And I can think about, my heart beating fast, and then that can translate into aggressive jabs in the viola. And so the emotions kind of inform the gestures that I want to create. And then I don't usually share that personal story because I like to keep it open-ended for the listener. I don't want the audience to be sitting there thinking about, my fight with my boyfriend or whatever it is. It's supposed to be something that's universal and that anyone can read themselves into. And hopefully, I think with music and art that we all love, we can revisit and it could mean something else to us at a different point in their lives. Not that this piece is about a fight with my boyfriend, but, just as an example of, you know, what it's about for me, it doesn't matter, because ideally the piece leaves me and enters the world and becomes something for someone else.
Well, Rita, this moves us to you because as you're executing this piece, this sort of journey from beginning to end here, I'm wondering what your relationship with the piece is when you met this piece, if you will, and then how are you executing that journey? How do you approach it yourself?
Well, what I love about this piece is I feel like it's so idiomatically written for the viola. I personally think, although cellists may disagree with me, but I think the viola is the closest to the human voice. And for me, this is telling such a story. It's so conversational. And I was looking at all this stuff and I was like, oh, why is that there? And why those and what does this mean? And it's so hard to actually write in words or even in notes to describe what you're feeling. And then I thought, okay, but if it's conversational, you know what am I trying to get across? What is the idea? Where are the motives? And so I was just kind of looking for these things that are coming forth. And is this an argumentative section, or is this a convincing section, or is this a section where I have to be strong or agitated? Yeah, so I think I was picking up on all of that without having talked to Julia. Actually, just read the little blurb in the score. And I was lucky enough to hear the recording of the first performance, or the premiere recording, and she does such a great job in the New York Philharmonic, Cynthia Phelps, and just completely fell in love with it. I mean, it's such a fantastic piece. It should be one of our standard ones.
I
We
agree.
violas have so few. We have so little that we're very grateful. But I'm just so excited about this one because this really is a good one. It's not just another viola piece. It should be up there with the standards. It's fantastic.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm a bit surprised, Julia, that you came up with the title after you wrote it. What I love about the title is that they're very, very much action verbs. They're not nouns, and so it's a kind of a push toward activity of some sort. And the way you've described it, coming up from the muck, from the primordial whatever that was there, that begins to then come out in whatever form that's supposed to be, and then just growing into something that's just so much fun in the second movement, um, and somewhat difficult. It's incredible. I love it. And then going into, as it continues to rise, into that third movement, that it does leave basically the earth, and it's released into the ether, into the atmosphere. It's really spectacular, and the way you do it with your orchestration, as well as the combination of the dynamics and the ranges of those, but the way you do it with your orchestration, it's ethereal. I love it. I think it's great, and that's why I think the audience is going to actually take to it immediately.
Everybody should go on YouTube now and listen to some of Julia's other works too. They're fantastic, the orchestra works. I spent some time listening, doing a little shallow dive, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, just so many colors and so well crafted, just gorgeous, gorgeous music. Yeah.
I
Thank
would love to pull that thread just a little bit and talk about how those colors are created. Maybe some things for audience to look for or listen for as they're hearing the piece, the way that those colors are executed. Who wants to take that?
Well, one thing that I can say, um, is that there are these what we call unison notes, where it's not just the same note like an A here and then two octaves above an A, but actually unison notes that occur either in a high range of the viola or a harmonic, that then can get transferred to a piccolo, that can get transferred to a crotalis, which is a percussion instrument, but it's bowed. And then all of a sudden you get these different timbres of the exact same pitch that you don't know where you are. I thought that was brilliant. I just love that. So now I throw it to you, Julia.
I'm sorry. What is the question though? How do I
How
come up
some
with
of,
the colors?
how some of those colors are executed, especially for those in the audience who aren't as deep dive familiar with instruments of the orchestra and techniques of those instruments.
Sure. Well, I mean, Ed really described it perfectly, but I guess I think a lot about blending instruments to try to create a composite sound or like it's its own instrument, you know. Um, so, and then I'm drawing from the colors of the viola as inspiration. So, kind of what are the instruments in the orchestra that already complement those colors of the viola. So, you know, bass clarinet is a favorite, contrabassoon is an English horn, you know, the auxiliary wind.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, and then thinking about harmonics, but also low harmonics, you know, like I love bass harmonics. I try to think about just sort of unusual sounds and as Ed was describing, trying to create almost like a mystical atmosphere or experience. And so a lot of that has to do with blending and also just thinking in terms of actual color. You know, so what instruments would create sort of like a soft purple, you know. For me, I just kind of will fantasize about that and hear certain things.
That's really cool.
Are you a synesthetic? Do you have
No.
you don't know?
Okay.
I am.
You are?
Oh yeah. I get you know, with the moment she said a soft purple, I'm thinking, oh, kind of velvet with a satin lining that's this purple that you're feeling, you know, and it was the way Albert Schweitzer used to talk about Bach, you know, the sky blue key of F major, that kind of thing, you know. And when the moment you said that, I thought, oh yeah, I get that.
And anyone watching and listening, Google synesthete or synesthesia. It's a pretty fascinating combination of things. It goes beyond just an association to an
Yeah.
actual experience.
Mhm.
Speaking of experience, what a transition. Experience the Intrigue is the title of this concert. How did that come about, and how, Ed, did you decide to pair the Rimsky-Korsakov and the Sibelius with Julia's piece?
Well, in a way, Julia's piece, Unearthed Release, became bookended by a kind of Eastern European connection
Hmm.
between Finland and Russia. And it in some ways it's a way for to demonstrate how different composers actually make colors or combine things to create something. For example, in the Finlandia, which some Finns really feel very strongly should be their national anthem, but it's not officially. Um, uh, Starts with this incredible brass with timpani to give you this feeling of kind of organ-like, hymn-like, um, chorale-like thing that leads into that beautiful melody that we're all familiar with in Finlandia. And then the way Sibelius then takes his kind of orchestration to make colors around all of that stuff, whether it's in the strings or the high winds or, you know, adding the triangle here, the cymbal there, along with these crashes and these crazy rhythmic things that are going on. I thought it was a kind of a neat way to go into something that's very familiar and very popular in a certain sense into something that's completely unknown, and that it kind of just put uh, uh, the conveyor belt, as it were, from the beginning to carry you through this concert. And then after intermission, you get one of the greatest orchestrators of all time, who is also one of the great tone painters of all time, giving you that story. Scheherazade is really a symphony, but it's kind of like a huge tone poem on steroids, and you get these this unifying theme throughout, much the same way Julia does with a lot of her motives and things that carry on from movement to movement and carry you through and rise you up through the piece. They're almost always they're all the same in that. I mean, they're not all the same. They're all connected in that respect. That's how that came about.
So in the last six, less than six now minutes of our chat here, I'd like to just get a couple of little other insights that aren't necessarily the music. But Rita, I'm going to start with you. You're playing a concerto here. You also play chamber music. Do you have different instruments that you play when you're approaching a large work like this with orchestra, as opposed to something you might play in a chamber ensemble situation? And if so, what are those instruments and how do you approach those things differently?
Well, in my jug band, I play the banjo.
I
I
want
do.
to hear this jug
Actually,
band.
my banjo is in the Lincoln Symphony office right now because it was signed by Bella Fleck when he was here last year. So
That's
I was like,
awesome.
that's it. The banjo's going to Lincoln. I need an autograph.
Oh, I
No,
love it. That's
I actually don't know. That's a really great question, actually. And it used to be that I got really fussy about, well, for this bow, it's such a beautiful sound, but it's not very loud, so I'll use it for chamber music. The bow is, the stick that I play on my viola. That was as far as I ever went, and then I just said, no, I'm just going to use the same bow, basically, because I like this bow. It works for all the things. And then for at one point in my life, I had a different there's this thing called a shoulder rest that attaches that makes us able to hold it under our chin, between our chin and our shoulder. And at one point I became convinced that one shoulder rest was definitely the one I was going to use for solo playing because it made it so much louder. But you know what? No, I play the same instrument, the same setup for orchestra, for chamber music, for solo. It's the same. I'll play a little louder for solo.
I, I love that musicians go through this too. I think the rest of us who are like, I know this is definitely the food processor that's going to make my kitchen life easier. Like it's the same for musicians. There's tools that
Right.
you think are going to make it easier, but don't necessarily. How old
Yeah.
is your viola?
My villa is from 1831, so it's
Oh,
almost 200 years old. I should have a party for it.
yeah. That's
yeah.
that's very that's very close to the year I was born.
Don't be fooled, my
You
friend.
don't look a day over 100. Don't
Oh,
don't.
no, that's right. Well, Julia, for you, I read that you've been composing since you were 9 years old.
Yes.
Yes. So not everybody necessarily goes into becoming a composer. It's a little bit rare. What do you remember about being that age and wanting to write your own music?
That's a great question. Well, I don't remember this, but the story is that when I was about 8, I came out of my bedroom and I said to my parents, I can write music. And, not having done it ever. But my parents were both artists, visual artists, and they took that seriously. And so they went out and they got me a keyboard. And then, I started piano lessons. I quit actually a year later because I hated practicing. I was more interested in coming up with something. Um, and when I was 9, I do remember. I guess this one of my first musical memories is I woke up one morning and I had a tune in my head, and I went to the piano and I was able to figure it out. And that's only happened to me twice since. These are sort of
Hmm.
these gifts that you hear about when an artist wakes up and just has an idea fully formed. Um, but that I think there was just sort of some internal confidence. And even though my uncle is a composer, I still didn't really see myself as a composer or even think that that was potentially a viable option for me. And I feel like a lot of that is because I did not really see any women composers in my life. And I did not see women composers on concerts. And I didn't have any female composition teachers. And so it did take, I had confidence when I was really young, but then, that starts to go away as you become a teenager. And then, as a young adult, I, had a lot of anxiety about becoming a composer and what that would mean. And writing this commission, actually, this Unearthed release, it was my first professional commission. I was 25. and I was still in school, and it was as a result of winning a competition. Um, and then the commission was funded by the Toolman Foundation, which is, meant to support female composers. And so, yeah, there was a lot of tension and anxiety about writing this piece, which I think you can hear in the work. There's a lot of strife in it, I think. And so part of that was just, my sort of overwhelm of the immense opportunity and my own and just how young I was too.
Well, this is really cool. We're going to get to hear a piece that really started it all, the launch for you, you know? That's just amazing.
And what a
Well,
good omen. It's a viola piece. What a great
that
omen.
is a great omen. Awesome, awesome. Well, it is the centerpiece of this concert. We've been talking about the Friday, February 13th concert for Lincoln's Symphony Orchestra taking place at the Lead Center for Performing Arts. You might already be there, or you might be watching this a week ahead. Experience the Intrigue with Julia Adolph's Concerto for Viola, which is called Unearthed Release. That is sandwiched in between a work by Sibelius that is very well known, Finlandia, and then Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade. Rita Porphyris is guest soloist playing this viola concerto. And Ed Polachek has paired these beautiful pieces with this concerto and will lead all of this music at the concert. All three of you, it's been such a pleasure learning just a little bit about this program. Thanks so much for the chat.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Real
Thank
pleasure.
Thank you.